You're listening to the Empowering Process podcast with your host, Gail Kraft. Listen as she holds frank discussions around how your purpose, being present, and trusting your power impacts your life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, leader, or developing your vision, you'll find wisdom and insights you can utilize right now. Welcome your host, Gail Kraft.
Hey, everybody. This is Gail Kraft from the Empowering Process podcast. Welcome. And I have with me an amazing friend, and I am so thrilled that you're going to meet her. Her name is Carrie Lee Klaiber. And I want to tell you a little bit about her. She's unique. In this time when labels and categories and division runs rampant, Carrie is choosing less descriptives to express who she is and from where her knowing has risen. In times past, you might have described her as a daughter, sister, mother, wife, friend, and nurse, craniological or cranial sacral, which I love, therapy, shamanic practitioner, and songwriter, just to name a few labels and categories she would conventionally have fit into. Not quite fitting anymore. Today, Carrie sets herself free by releasing all licenses, registrations, certifications, and contracts not aligned to who she is, and sees this activity as her ongoing priority. She now asks that we meet one another as living women, co-creators of our reality, inhabitants of Mother Earth, and children of God, our Creator, with infinite possibilities. And so today, Carrie and I are going to talk about the elements of the earth and how we are all made up of those elements and how we can tap into them. Welcome, Carrie. And I'm so glad that I couldn't put you into a category. I'm like, well, what do I say?
Thank you, Gail. Thank you.
Yeah. So you just don't fit into the category. So tell us a little bit um, about how the elements came into your life and why they're so important to you.
Well, I was born into a body that was super, super sensitive. And so I found that my environment, I was reactive in my environment. I had allergies, I had asthma, I had acne, all those inflammatory things that happen in a body. And it started really from the get go in my life. And so I was allergic to food. I would go to birthday parties. I couldn't eat what everybody else could eat. It impacted my world in those ways. A little bit of, afraid of my environment and afraid of my body, which was really the more compounding issue that carried through my life. And so walking around afraid of my body, I wasn't even consciously aware of it, of course. That was just all I knew. But when I became a mother, I started to really look at things because I didn't want my children to experience their world and environment with fear or anxiety. And I
Mm-hmm.
really needed to look at why I had that experience. And so, through some significant health challenges that came up through my life, I started to look for alternatives. At that time, I was a nurse in conventional allopathic medical world, and I went to the conventional medical places looking for help. And their intentions were to help me. But really, what I started to find is that I was being handled bottles instead of tools. So, and one day, one of my children was very small, and I got a bottle to counteract the other bottle, to counteract the other bottle. And I looked at the label and it said, don't operate heavy machinery. But it didn't say anything about be cautious when you're caring for an infant at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, something's not matching in this picture. And so I'm kind of making it light. It wasn't light at the time. It was frighteningly scary that I was having so much discomfort in being who I was and not knowing what to do about it and trying to be a mother, trying to be a wife, trying to be a nurse and all those things. Um, and I was not finding my answers outside of me. So I had a brilliant doctor at the time who was into mind-body medicine, and she sent me in the direction of craniosacral therapy. And I remember making my call saying I was coming for a massage, not knowing what the heck I was actually going for.
And it's one of my favorite massages, by the way. That's all I want.
So I went there. I was having pretty bad headaches was the purpose of that mission. And I had an experience on that table with that woman where I felt heard, I felt seen, I felt considered, separate from my body. It wasn't just I was there because I was having these bodily experiences. I was being seen as a whole picture. And no one had ever spoken to me like, what does it feel like? Except my 2-year-old son. I think you've heard this story from me before, but I was reading books with my son and at bedtime, and we finished reading the books. And when we finished, he said, when am I going to be a bird again? And at that time I said, oh, you're a boy, you're not going to be a bird. And then he asked, when am I going to be a baby again? And I said, you're just going to be a growing up boy. I really didn't have any other sense or reference point for him.
Right.
And then he asked me, what is it like to be you? And I stopped and something shot through my body. No one had ever asked me that question. And I stopped and I thought, this is a 3-year-old boy. I must have misunderstood this question. So I asked him again. I said, can you ask me that again? And he said, what is it like to be Carrie? And my life changed forever, always, after that question being asked by my 3-year-old son. And I started to ask myself that question I never had.
Okay.
I had always said, what is it like to be the Carrie that someone else wants you to be or thinks you should be? So I went on a search, and I'm somebody who's a bit of a nothing bad about pit bulls in the good way. I don't let something go when I go after it. So I'm
a dog with a bone, right?
Thank you. That's a little better. And so I went on a search, and I did for many, many years. I'll say, after that experience on the craniosacral therapy table and with someone who saw me as a whole woman, I went to find out why I hadn't thought of myself that way before. So I studied Reiki and craniosacral therapy, and along with that, somato-emotional release, which was tremendous. I'd never looked at my emotions. I'd never looked at why my feelings might be what they were. So in search of what I thought was physical symptom management, I dove into myself in a way that I never had even known was available to me. And part of that was a calling to shamanism. And even then, similar to the craniosacral therapy, when I went looking for a shaman to learn from, I thought I was going to learn Native American culture. And I thought I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I had a calling.
Right.
And so that was the beginning of my introduction to the elements, my son, and then through some shamanic mentors.
Right. And so I've participated in some of the circles that you hold where people gather and we just experience each other. There's really not a real strong agenda. It's whatever comes up and we go with the flow. And we talk about what our elements are, our primary elements. We're all every element. It's kind of like I do some Akashic record work. And through that, I discover what your primary gift is. We all have all of the gifts. We're all communicators. We're all seers. We're all, homebodies. We all have these strengths, but there's a primary one that if we tap into that is our purpose, is our guiding light, right? And so when you talk about the elements, we're talking about the elements that create the universe, not just the earth, but the universe. And if we have no problem looking at the earth and understanding that there are minerals, that there is water, that there are plants, right? If we understand, well, all of that makes up the earth, why are we not open to the fact that we come from the earth?
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
No, we've talked about in those circles what the elements mean to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the culture that I had exposure to was African shamanism, and a Dagara tribe was the 5 elements that they worked with and called each of us in a clan. Like you're saying, your primary, gift, your primary clan element would be what they were basing that on.
Mm-hmm.
That has some numerology and some astrology of intermingled in it. But what struck me when I went to I'm of the Earth clan, and here I am allergic to it all. And I was struck when I started to have a relationship with the elements, because suddenly my allergies and my asthma and my breathing and my skin and my nervous system that had been so assaulted started to balance, because I was not having a balanced relationship with my environment, because it's like we put oil in water. I was not mixing and mingling with my environment. I was avoiding it. I was blocking and numbing any relationship with it. Antihistamines, antibiotics, they say anti,
Right.
everything, right?
Right.
I finally learned to be moving towards them instead of against them. And so, with the 5 elements that this particular tribal culture uh, really balances their lives and their tribe and their lives, their livelihood with, are fire, water, nature, mineral, and earth. And I really got struck as I was a nurse. That's my old title, but learning about our bodies through the anatomy physiology lens often was brought to us through a pathology lens. What is wrong with the anatomy and physiology? And finally, I started to find what was right about my anatomy and physiology. Uh, yeah.
Right.
And once
Looking at
we
things, it's perspective, right?
once we put a magnifying glass on what's going well, then the other part that needs support seems to balance. So, for instance, with fire, we've got this digestive system that literally burns up so we have energy. And when I'm a have a scientific mind too, so I want proof, and evidence of these things. And so we have electrical system in our body. We're not plugged in. We have it naturally, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to see EEGs or EKGs on these diagnostic machines.
Right.
So we have this fire in our belly that digests what we ingest, and it helps us determine where that energy is going to be put. And then we have water, which we are salt water, basically more so than anything else. And that water is a conductor of electricity. And so if the fire and the water are in balance, then they can work beautifully. And if not, then we feel short-circuited, or we feel, all the different things that we would if electricity is out of control. It can burn things. It can be dangerous if it's
Right.
not in balance with the conductor of water. And then I was saying earlier that the awareness that we are a seed that germinates in the womb and becomes a tree. And we have these hair leaves that fall, skin that sloughs off all the time, just like bark and leaves. Our veins are pumping, just like the sap in a tree
Mm-hmm.
is constantly pumping, getting our nourishment through the soil and through the earth. And our lungs look exactly like a leaf if you look under a microscope.
Mm-hmm.
It's I can't deny that we are all connected to these things, and the trees offer that internet under the ground. Trees communicate with each other through their roots, through their leaf systems. It's and we walk on the earth. When we walk on the earth, oftentimes we're not.
Well, so one of my favorite things to do when I, especially in California, when I was living here, when I was feeling ungrounded, if you will, or confused, or, for me, I often was out here instead of down here. I just take my shoes off and walk in the grass. Right. And that was so calming. Right. My favorite, walk in the grass, or let's go to the beach and let me walk in the sand and feel the sand pull as the water pulls the sand down under your feet. I love that feeling, right? To sit there and feel that happening relaxes me. Right.
And
right.
so much of what we've chosen, we live in cement foundationed homes. We live in apartments where we're farther and farther away from that energy that we really are meant to be touching upon.
Right.
So the other mineral, we talked about fire, water, nature, mineral. Our bones are calcium, primarily, and minerals. And all of the messages that come in through the water, through the fire, through the nature of who we are imprinted and remembered in the bones. They carry the stories of who we are and our creation. And they don't forget. And they carry the generations from before and the generations yet to come within us. And we can tap into those stories. And like you with the Akashics, it's accessible to us to understand from where we came and from where we can aspire to go. And
for those who are more religious than spiritual, the Bible says that we carry the sins of the father for 7 generations. We're carrying that in our DNA. Those are the stories that you're talking about. I went through this with you not too long ago. Like, I had guilt come up that was not mine. Right. And I was like, where is that coming from? And it was from my parents and from my parents' parents. Right. And so in order to break that chain moving forward, I had to resolve where that guilt was coming from, which was very easy to do, as it turns out.
Nicely done.
Nicely done. But we don't recognize that sometimes the feelings that we have within us are not from our own experiences, right? And it doesn't make them any less powerful in how they shape our choices.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
One of my favorite people to know about is Gabor Mate. Do you know Gabor Mate?
No.
Dr. Gabor Mate, I'm going to look on my paper here. He has a movie called The Wisdom of Trauma.
I've heard of that.
And he feels that a trauma-informed society will be a compassionate society, but the basis of it is, it's not the trauma that creates the issue. It's what happens in response to the trauma, whether we are heard, whether we are seen, whether we feel guilt, shame, blame about what did occur.
Right.
And so, yes, in this experience, it might be something that happened to me, or it might be something that happened to my 4 mothers or fathers that then comes back to the surface for me to shift the story around. So if in my generation and the generations before, we passed on this victimhood story, life isn't fair, everybody's after me, nothing ever works out for me.
Right. Or this is your role and you have to stay in your role. Don't ask to step out of your role. Right.
Be a martyr. You've made a contract to be this for me or for someone else. Yeah. And that was actually one of the biggest shifts for me. Was the first, I went to a little demo of the shaman that I ended up mentoring with at one of those expos. And she hooked right into my grandmother, who I loved and adored. But she had that, and I didn't even know victim mentality. That came to me that day. That was brought to my awareness. So the shaman felt the sense of my grandmother present with me when I came to the table asking for an experience with her, her way of gathering information. And she said, I sense this grandmother energy, and I could figure out who it was because I did have a very good connection with her. And she said, tell me about your grandmother. And I said, well, I would describe her that if she was in a room and she wanted the tissues across the room, she would say, instead of please pass the tissues, she would say, oh, I wish I could reach the tissues.
You sure you're not Jewish? Oh,
So she said, yeah. And what I was really aware of at that time is myself and my oldest son, we had it going on big. We were in the victimhood big.
Right.
And so when that came to my awareness and she gave me kind of a little ritual to go off and do for some healing, just bringing that awareness to us begins the healing process. I didn't even have to get to the remedy and the prescription that she suggested that I experience. But yeah, so the story of my grandmother had passed on and passed on, and my son and I got to change the script.
Right. And that's the power that's within you. Right. And I love that you said awareness was really the powerful step. You know, when we talked about the grief that you know, or the guilt that rose, for me, it was the awareness that I even had this that actually resolved the issue. I just needed confirmation that it was okay to let it go, right?
Yes.
And for many of us, we are so accustomed and ingrained with ignoring and not facing who we are and the pain that we hide from because it hurts too much, that we are manipulated and controlled by that pain and those experiences because we don't resolve them. And by resolving them, and then I'll let you go on with, because you're not finished with the elements, right?
Pretty close.
Pretty close. I know when we resolve them, the passing through of that, you know, changes your life tremendously. And the fear of the unknown, what's on the other side. So we talk about, you know, you get through it and the other side is amazing, but the other side is unknown.
That's right.
Right. And people get comfortable in their pain. And so they ignore their pain so that they can be comfortable in it.
That's right.
Right.
I mean, you know John and his work through personal mastery, and so I experienced his work early on too, which gave me a new language for a lot of these things. But our soul wants us to be right. So if we decide that we want to be comfortable in our pain, then it'll keep giving us pain to stay comfortable.
Right.
With the intention of making us right.
And making us, this is what you want. Okay.
This is what you're saying you want, is to be comfortable. Right. And right now this is the choice you're making. So it's getting a new language has been huge. And part of it is I'm really feeling like creating a relationship with every moment. So creating a relationship with my body started with the craniosacral therapy. I didn't have a relationship with my body. It felt separate. My head felt separate from my knee. It's not true. They're all, you know, interconnected. I always kid with people who come for body or energy work. It's like the head bone's connected to the toe bone.
Right.
They are. We've been taught, you know, all the specialists out there focus on the toe bone or the head bone, and we're missing everything in between and around.
There's a superhighway in between.
That's right. So the fact, you know, oftentimes it's funny because if someone will come for hands-on work, I'll say, please don't give me too much information, because then I can listen to their body, not their words, and then gather information. And, sometimes I put my hands where they're having an experience, and other times I'll put my hands somewhere where they didn't think the problem was, and the area that was giving them their trouble, it gets relief.
Right. I have a dear friend who's an amazing body talk therapist. And, she will tell you, it doesn't matter what you're coming to me for, that's probably not your issue.
That's right. That's right. If it's in our conscious, it's probably not it, because so much of what we're operating from is our subconscious.
Right. 85 to 90% of what we do is driven by our subconscious. Yeah. And we think it's our conscious mind. And then I'll let you get back. I love this analogy that I use. So think of your brain as like the boss and the worker bees, right? And if you think of the pyramid of work of an office, the boss, and then all the worker bees. The boss doesn't do the work, the worker bees do. Now the boss will give a directive, but sometimes those worker bees are going to do what the heck they want to do. Right? And that's what goes on. And it's when we learn to consciously communicate with our subconscious and be clear and specific, like you said about the language, the words that you use. Like you don't want to say don't. Right? I don't want to see that anymore. Your subconscious will go, oh, there, okay. It doesn't understand the don't, right? And it's going to do exactly what you give it directive to do in full force, right? So anyway, so that I love that analogy. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share it.
And in fact, you're saying that the top down, what my new reality with my label-less world and my degree and my registration and certificate free world is I'm flipping it on its head, so that all these parts of who I am and the people, like you say, all the worker bees, I want my worker bees in charge.
Right. You want them to communicate.
Yep.
Yeah. You want to clear that path.
So get the worker bees talking so I can focus on this end intention.
Right.
And that's another challenge. I could go off on the hierarchy of that. But yeah, I think that I do think in my world right now, I'm tipping everything I knew upside down. I am challenging everything I thought was and finding out where I land.
And the thing is where you land is probably just temporary.
Well, of course. That's
yeah.
What I was saying to you. I'm in a free fall, and in fact, I don't really want to hang onto the shore. I want to flow with that river. The river has a destination. There's a beautiful Hopi prayer that talks about the river having a destination. And if we hang onto the shore, we get ripped to shreds and suffer.
Right.
And so allowing the river to have its destination and keep my head up and look around, and the message is see who's with you. And I'm really making a conscious intention of who is with me and who do I want this time to be spent and shared with. So that's part of why I'm here today, because I always appreciate sharing my time with you.
I love it.
But I think we are at a pivotal moment in time where getting to know all of our worker bees, getting to know all of our bosses, getting to know all of our old stories that don't serve us, and dream about the stories that we want to create. It's timely. It's
timely. It's absolutely timely. I joke, but it's true that that I have a board of directors. I have a crowd up there.
I love that.
Right, right. And sometimes I have to say, "Whoa, guys, one at a time."
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Or the information. I say it's a machine gun. When you hear me say machine gun, that means information is coming too fast for my brain to gather.
Yes.
Right? It's like you just slow down a minute. I mean, just slow down a minute. Don't stop. Just slow down. Right? Right? And you're right. It's the questioning of everything. Don't take anything as face value. One of my favorite tools, if you will, from my corporate world that I use. So I'm a 6 Sigma green belt. If anyone knows what that is, whoopee ding. But but
Mhm.
they have some great tools that you can apply to your life, not just
Mhm.
on projects and development. And one of them is called the assumption buster, right?
Mm.
Right? We do things because we assume that this is how it's always done, or we assume that this is the right way, or we assume that this is what is supposed to happen. And when you start to question your assumptions, well, why is that so important? Well, what would happen if I didn't do that? Well, what wouldn't happen if I changed that? Well, who is it so important to? Why is it so important? Why do I think it's so important? What story was I telling myself to believe that this was true? Right? You ask those questions, and all of a sudden, it doesn't matter. And in fact, you might even forget what was so important in the first place.
Right,
Right?
right. I was
Mhm.
saying to somebody recently that I was never intended to be someone to take a multiple choice quiz or test because I could see all the possibilities.
Right? Right. Sometimes exactly. I get stumped. Well, why is that's true? Well, why isn't that true? That is true given certain circumstances. Why are you giving me these questions? I can't answer them. Right.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I've always been that. I was that kid. I'm still that woman that says, I don't see it just one way. I
Hmm.
just see so many different possibilities for every opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And if I have to choose one, so this is, many of my clients will be stuck because of there's so many opportunities.
Yeah.
And I will say, know that you can pick one and change your mind tomorrow. Right? You're
The written
not,
in stone fear. Yeah.
yeah, and that's as a recovering project manager.
Yeah.
Right? Um, even when I was a project manager, we would create our project plan and then I would put it in the drawer
Mhm.
because life happens.
Mhm.
And if you just have, we want this to look like this when we're done. How we get there is going to change,
Yeah.
right? It,
The
it,
how is always variable. If you're lucky, I went to when I was very early in this stage of exploring outside of traditional, what I conventional uh, gathering of information. I went to this woman when I wanted to start a holistic nursing practice. And I sat and I remember the feeling. I sat in her big leather chair. I felt like this little kid with my legs dangling. I felt so uncertain of who I was. I felt so small. And she said to me, "So have you done a business plan?" And I, was horrified because I'm not built to make a business plan. I'm just not built that way. Some people are brilliant at it. It wasn't me. So I was horrified to say no. And she said, "Good." She said, because oftentimes people will, and they will be so laser focused on that business plan that other opportunities that come in will be missed. And that was a really eye-opening day. I mean, it gave me a little bit off the hook, and I needed to do a little more organization and focus than I had gathered yet. But the permission to allow, that word allow has been huge for me this week, even. Just allow.
right?
Yeah.
Right? Let it flow. Um, so again, I do work with clients to create a business plan, and then again, we burn it. Um, because because I want them to practice thinking, right? Many people don't. Well, why are you doing this? Well, because I want to help people feel better. It's not your job to make someone feel better. So why do you really want to do it? Well, because yeah, I don't care about you, and neither do they care about you. So why do you really want to do this? Right? Right? Um, and so it's a practice in asking yourself really pertinent questions, and getting accustomed to asking yourself pertinent questions. And frequently I'll be working with people and say, I don't want you to have a goal at the end of the week. I want you to tell me what you want to feel at the end of the week. What is it going to feel like when you're done with whatever it is that you do every day this week? And every day when you get up, figure out what you want to do. And then if it doesn't feel right, change it.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that because you know, when I say I'm not, without the labels and certificates, I'm not taking away the part of my life that the richness that all of that experience held. It doesn't go away because I chose to say I'm not a registered nurse anymore.
Right.
It's it holds the richness of that moment in time and the lessons I learned and all the wisdom that I gained through whether I still embrace all of the ways I was taught. It was purposeful and it was intended to be part of my journey. So I love that the creative part. And like I said, I see now how much I was fitting into there's a right answer. You know, we're taught there's a right answer. There just simply really isn't.
Right. And how many people's world falls apart when their right answer is proven not to be right anymore?
Yeah.
You know, how many people, especially like COVID hit so many people with disempowerment because their customs, their routines were shattered, right? We can no longer get together for Thanksgiving dinner, right? So, you know, so you're choosing not to gather because you feel that it's safer. What can you do instead then? And why was that so important? And why is the ritual so important, right? What does that bring you? And can you get that in a different way? Because the opportunity is no longer available to you, right? Life is fluid, things change. And if you understand what you're getting out of it, right, then you can tap into yourself and figure out, well, how, first of all, is it important that I get that? And then if it is for you, then, well, how else can I get it? In a very healthy and holistic way. That's another thing. Let's be ergonomic, no harm to anyone else, no harm to the earth, and no harm to yourself. So let's finish the elements.
Okay, so we talked about fire, water, nature, mineral. So Earth is the holder of all the elements, and it's kind of on the wheel that they utilize for that particular tribal culture. It's the center of the wheel that holds all the elements, and each of the elements in the teachings have their in alignment behaviors and their out of alignment behaviors. We've talked a lot about that in our circles, right? And so what the original question was, why are the elements so, valuable and important to me as part of who I am becoming and remembering who I am, is when I found that I had an earth clan component to who I was. The earth element in its alignment is the mother, nurturer, the gatherer, wants everybody on her lap, wants everybody comfortable, cozy, and out of alignment, depleted from giving, giving, giving. And I had just come off hospitalization from depletion, depletion, depletion. And so this was a new language that I could communicate to myself and to my body with, to say, okay, I disassociated from you. I numbed myself out because I was feeling you too much. I was hearing your messages too loudly and I did not know what to do with them, and how to reclaim the communication with you has been my intention since that awareness came to be.
Right. And you use all of your experiences, right? And all of your lessons, which you have every day, in working with clients who come to you who are out of alignment, and holding circles of amazing people who just want to gather and share our own stories and lift each other up so that we can go forward and do what we're called to do in this earth. And meeting you was through John. And so fortuitous. And folks, I met her physically only once.
Yeah.
And it's been like two years now that we've known each other. Pretty amazing woman. And the elements are just a piece of what she does. And, you know, like she said, you can't describe someone who is the word connected comes to mind, but that's not the right word either. There isn't a word. It just is. And she just shows up. And for some reason, she is able to show up the way that you need her to show up because she's the perfect mirror. So if people are curious and want to get to know you more, Carrie, how would they reach out to you?
So I'm a old school phone call person. So I can be called at 978-806-6090 because I like to
Fantastic.
hear your voice.
And she's not on Facebook. She's not on LinkedIn. She does not have a website. I don't believe anymore. She is definitely old school. And that's one of the things that I love about her. There's nothing old about her school. Thank you, everybody. This is Gail Kraft from the Empowering Process podcast. If this resonated with you, please let us know. If questions came up because of this, type them in, let us know about them. Maybe we'll get back together and answer some of those. If you know someone who maybe could benefit from this, share it out to them because we're here to share and help you grow. Gail Kraft, the Empowering Process podcast. Bye-bye. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailkraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.